Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world lit only by candlelight. You step barefoot onto cold stone floors. The air smells faintly of beeswax, dried herbs, and something vaguely musty. Maybe wood smoke. Maybe old sweat. You're not sure. You're inside a small room, centuries old, the kind with low ceilings and one tiny window shuttered against the night. There's a bed in the corner, if you can call it that. A lumpy sack of straw, covered in linen stiff from line drying and not nearly as white as modern bleach would have it. Your pillow is questionable. The blanket smells like it's been shared by at least 4 people and one confused goat. Still, this is where you're expected to sleep tonight. There's a single candle burning on a wooden stool nearby, its flame wobbling with every draft. Shadows sway on the walls. You hear the crack of timber in the ceiling above you and a muffled sneeze from the room next door. This isn't a hotel. It's a 15th century home. And you, poor time traveler, are stuck in the past. Welcome to Nighttime Tales. And I should warn you, you probably won't survive this. I mean, not hygienically. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment your location and your local time. Let's see who's falling asleep across the world together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie back onto the straw-stuffed mattress, and it crackles slightly beneath you. Not unpleasant, but definitely weird. The room feels alive somehow, like the air is thicker, slower, as if dust and silence have weight here. Let's get one thing clear. The concept of a bedroom hasn't always existed. In the medieval world, sleeping wasn't something done in neat little rooms with memory foam mattresses and blackout curtains. No, it was communal, chaotic, and deeply bound to superstition. You glance around the room again. There's a wooden crucifix above the bed. Not for decoration. This was serious spiritual protection. Sleep wasn't just rest, it was a vulnerable state. Evil spirits, demons, even witches were believed to visit you in your sleep. Better pray you don't snore too loud. Your bed might be in the kitchen, next to a still warm hearth. Or in the same room where people eat, store pickled vegetables, and occasionally give birth. Privacy, not a thing. Modesty, overrated. You're basically horizontal in the living room with your in-laws and a cat that refuses to blink. And if you're lucky enough to be a merchant or tradesman with your own home, guess what? You still might share your bed with travelers. Paying for a bed meant literally renting space on it. There was even a word for it, bed sharing. So yes, you're spooning with strangers tonight. You're welcome. Now, you might think, okay, sure, maybe this was just in small homes. But even in castles and manor houses, you weren't necessarily alone. Servants often slept on the floor of your room. Children, always nearby. And don't forget the rats, your most loyal companions. As you start to get comfortable, or at least resigned, let's talk about mattresses. Straw was common, not hay, because that was animal feed. Straw was less nutritious, and less itchy, fun fact. But even straw wasn't consistent. Over time, it would compress and attract pests. That's why beds were routinely aired out, and the straw stuffing was changed twice a year, if you were responsible. If you were poor, you slept on sacks filled with leaves, moss, or just plain rags. But if you were rich, oh, you'd get the luxury of feathers. Goose feathers, swan if you were royalty. Sounds great, right? Until you realize that a featherbed was a breeding ground for lice and mites. And it weighed more than a grown man when soaked in humidity. No washing machines, remember. And sheets. If they existed at all, they were made from linen, and you were expected to sleep naked between them. Why? Because your body oils helped season the fabric. Also, people believed linen had cleansing properties. Which, it didn't. You start to feel itchy. Is that your imagination? Or is your medieval bed coming alive? Now, lighting. You're lucky to have one candle. Candles were expensive. Most people used rushlights, basically reeds dipped in animal fat. They burn quickly, smell horrible, and have a nasty tendency to set things on fire. Perfect bedtime ambiance. But you're not just lying in a fire hazard. You're lying in history. This whole setup reflects how people once saw sleep. As necessary, but mysterious. There was a strong belief that how you slept affected your morality, your health, even your soul. Sleep too much. Slothful. Sleep too little. Unstable. Sleep on your left side. Digestive doom. On your back. Welcome, demons. Oh, and forget sleeping late. Most people went to bed soon after sundown, not because they were wholesome, but because candles cost money and night was terrifying. You shift under your coarse blanket and try to find a position that doesn't poke you. Your neck aches already. Let's be honest. You miss your mattress. Now comes your favorite part of the night, not dying. See, before bed, people did small rituals. Some whispered prayers. Some hung protective herbs like rosemary or lavender over their bedposts. Some placed knives under their pillows, to ward off evil, or possibly the snoring spouse next to them. And if you were in parts of Eastern Europe, you might sleep with garlic around your neck. Just in case vampires were real. Scholars still argue whether these bedtime rituals were purely superstitious or had cultural logic behind them. Some think it was symbolic, a way of gaining psychological comfort. Others believe it was part of a larger system of folk medicine and cosmology, in which sleep was just one battlefield in the war between good and evil. You hear a rooster crow in the distance. That can't be right, it's still night. But then again, roosters don't care. Neither does time. You wonder how long you've been lying here. Maybe hours. Maybe centuries. One more thing. In wealthier homes, the bed frame was a work of art. Carved oak, 4 posters, sometimes with heavy curtains to block drafts. But in more modest homes, a literal bed frame might be ropes strung across a wooden frame, supporting your mattress. Ever heard the phrase, sleep tight? That's because these ropes had to be tightened regularly, or you'd sag into a hammock of disappointment. You shift again. The straw pokes your side. Something squeaks. Could be the bed. Could be, not the bed. Your eyelids grow heavier. Or maybe that's just the lack of oxygen in this poorly ventilated room. Either way, you're finally starting to relax. Sort of. Because just as you start to doze off, you remember, this is only the first sleep. And you still have to wake up. But we'll talk about that in a bit. You wake up. Or, more accurately, you drift out of something that wasn't quite sleep, wasn't quite wakefulness. The room around you hasn't changed. The candle's long gone out, and the only light now is the bluish-gray seep of moonlight pushing through a crooked shutter. The straw mattress crackles beneath you again. The air's colder now, and somewhere outside, a dog is barking in slow, irregular bursts. It's the kind of bark that doesn't mean danger, it just means I'm here and bored. You sit up. Not because you're restless, but because that's exactly what you're supposed to do. Welcome to the strangest part of your medieval sleep routine. The gap between first and second sleep. See, back then, the average person didn't sleep for 7 or 8 uninterrupted hours. That's a modern invention, thanks in large part to electric lighting and 1905 jobs. What used to happen, and what many scholars believe was totally normal for centuries, was biphasic sleep. You'd go to bed shortly after sundown and sleep for about 4 hours. That was your first sleep. Then you'd wake up, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 2. This in-between period had a name, the watch. And it was far from idle time. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floor is colder than you remember. Your breath fogs faintly in the moonlight. So what do you do during this eerie, liminal stretch of night? Well, anything, really. Some people prayed. Others got up and tended fires. A few snuck off for, intimate visits. This was prime baby-making time, according to many medieval health manuals. Doctors believed the body was warmer and more fertile in the middle of the night. Science? Maybe not. But it was a decent excuse. Some people even read or wrote, if they could afford candlelight. Others just sat quietly, letting their minds drift. You decide to wander a bit. The hallway outside is narrow, your steps soft on creaky floorboards. You reach the kitchen, or what passes for one. A fire's burned down to a quiet red glow. There's a ceramic cup on the table filled with something that smells earthy. Is that mushroom broth? Because yes, this is where things get weird. Some medieval folk believed that certain foods, eaten in this midnight window, could enhance dreams or encourage prophetic visions. Mushrooms were popular. Not the psychedelic kind, hopefully, but ones believed to open the mind. So go ahead, sip it. It's lukewarm and tastes like damp wood. Delicious. Scholars still argue whether the biphasic sleep pattern was universal across cultures, or more common in colder climates where firelight and early darkness shaped human behavior. But the written records are pretty clear. This middle of the night wake up was so routine that people didn't even question it. You lean against the doorway and stare out a narrow, glassless window. The stars are terrifyingly clear. No smog, no planes, just a raw sky. Somewhere far off, a wolf howls. Of course it does. You head back to the bed, curl up again, and prepare for second sleep. This phase was considered the deeper, dreamier part of the night. The kind where spirits could slip in and messages could be delivered, if you believed in that sort of thing. Which, in this century, most people did. Dream interpretation was huge. Dream books circulated among the literate, offering cryptic translations for what your mind cooked up in the night. Dreaming of teeth. Someone's going to die. Dreaming of water. Emotional trouble. Dreaming of your neighbor's goat in a wig. You probably need help, but no one will say it. And yes, nightmares were often blamed on demons, or bad digestion. Sometimes both. You roll onto your other side. Your arm is numb from straw pressure, your feet are cold, and you're very aware of the fact that you are sharing this room with two people, a toddler, and a cat that keeps silently judging you from the foot of the bed. Still, your eyes start to drift closed again. Let's pause to appreciate how weirdly structured the medieval night was. Time wasn't divided like it is now. You didn't have alarms or schedules. Time was kept by church bells, seasons, shadows. If you needed to wake early, you'd hire someone called a knocker-upper, yes, really, who'd tap on your shutters with a stick. Sometimes a pea shooter, like an alarm clock with attitude. But at night, the rules were different. You could sleep when the dark came and rise when your body told you to. You could talk to the stars, sneak a snack, mutter secrets into the floorboards. This quiet gap between sleeps was its own kind of world. A dream inside the waking hours. A moment suspended from obligation. Oddly beautiful, isn't it? Now, back in bed, your limbs begin to feel heavier. The straw doesn't poke quite as much. The blanket, coarse as it is, smells familiar now. Like wool and dust and something you can't name, but accept. Second sleep takes you. And this time, it's deeper. You fall faster. Your dreams feel stranger. You're back in your village, only the houses are upside down. The moon is red. Your mother is there, but she's made of bread. That's normal, right? Somewhere, your subconscious is telling stories. You just hope they don't include rats. Hours pass. The rooster crows again, this time on time. You wake up slowly, eyes gummy, back stiff. The candle is just a nub now. The shutters glow faintly as daylight creeps in. Someone else is already up, probably the oldest person in the house, stoking the hearth and muttering about weather and bones. You stretch. Your back pops in 7 different places. Sleep is over, at least for now. You survived the night, 2 whole chunks of it. A few medieval weirdos even believed this split sleep pattern mirrored divine cycles, day and night, light and dark, sacred rest and sacred waking. But most people, they just did it because that's how life worked. One last thing before we go. The idea of 8 straight hours of sleep is modern. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution, when factory schedules and artificial light changed everything, that we started believing in uninterrupted sleep as the norm. Before that, your midnight wake up. Totally natural, maybe even healthy. Makes you wonder, if you wake up at 2 a.m. tonight, maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just medieval. You settle back into the worn bed, but now your mind wanders to the odd pillow beside you, or rather, what's supposed to be a pillow. It's not what you imagine. There's no fluffy cloud of feathers or memory foam hugging your head. Nope. You're staring at a rough, rectangular sack filled with straw. Or maybe it's wool. Could be even worse, a hard block of wood, shaped like a primitive neck brace. Believe it or not, pillows have been around for thousands of years, but their forms, purposes, and meanings have evolved wildly. In this time and place, softness wasn't the point. Support was. You try to imagine resting your head on a wooden pillow. Doesn't sound cozy, right? But these hard pillows were common in many cultures, including parts of medieval Europe. Made from carved wood, stone, or even porcelain, they kept your head elevated and prevented lice from making themselves too comfortable. Yeah, lice were the real nightmare back then. But more on that later. The wooden pillow was sometimes ornately carved, a status symbol that said, "I'm fancy enough not to have a straw sack." Plus, they were easy to clean. No feathers to fluff or straw to replace, just wipe it down. You push your head against the softish straw one again, realizing you've got it easy. Meanwhile, some wealthy Europeans had feather pillows. Goose feathers, swan feathers, luxurious and expensive. But as you might guess, feather pillows were perfect breeding grounds for mites and fleas. Not so dreamy. Interestingly, in some monasteries, wooden pillows were used as a form of mild ascetic punishment, a way to deny comfort and encourage spiritual vigilance. You smile at that idea. Sleep deprivation is a spiritual exercise. No thanks. Scholars still argue whether wooden pillows were primarily functional or symbolic. Some think they prevented neck cramps. Others say they were ritualistic, separating the living from the dead or warding off spirits. After all, sleep was a liminal state where worlds overlapped. You rub your neck, feeling the stiffness already settling in. Maybe a wooden pillow isn't such a bad idea. Now, imagine the covers. Wool, linen, and hemp were the fabrics of choice. Silk was rare and reserved for royalty or the super rich. These materials were coarse by modern standards, and they smelled, well, alive. Fabrics weren't washed often. Washing was a complicated, labor-intensive process. Smell. You'll get used to it. Sometimes, bedding was layered to protect against the cold, mattresses topped with quilts stuffed with wool or down. But drafts were everywhere. No central heating, no insulation, just stone walls that sucked warmth from your bones. Cold feet were the enemy of sleep. People used various tricks to keep toes warm, warming stones wrapped in cloth, or even tiny fires placed near the bed. Not very safe by today's standards, but hey, they had to try. You toss and turn, searching for comfort. The bed is uneven, the pillow hard or scratchy, and the night air nips at your exposed skin. Here's a weird detail. In some medieval cultures, sleeping sitting up was common. Nobles and monks sometimes slept propped in chairs or on benches, partly for posture and partly to avoid dreams believed to be dangerous if lying flat. You shudder at the thought of trying to get a full night's rest in a wooden chair. Bed curtains were another interesting feature. Not just for privacy, but also to block drafts and, importantly, to keep out unwanted spirits. Heavy fabric draped around the bed created a private bubble, an oasis of warmth and safety. If you had bed curtains, you were probably doing okay. But most people didn't. Your thoughts drift to the phrase you've probably heard, sleep tight. Ever wonder what that meant? It comes from the days when beds were supported by ropes stretched across a wooden frame. These ropes had to be tightened regularly, or the bed would sag like a hammock and make you feel like you were sleeping in a bowl. So sleeping tight meant sleeping on a well-strung bed, firm and supportive. You give your imaginary rope bed a mental tug. Now, here's a quirky fact. Some people believed that the direction you sleep in matters, that your head should point away from the door, or aligned with certain compass directions for good dreams or health. This wasn't just superstition, it was tied to ancient beliefs about the flow of energies in the body and universe. You shift your position, considering if your head points north or south. Does it really matter? Probably not for your comfort, but it mattered for your soul. As you nestle back into your scratchy sheets, the candle flickers low. Your neck aches. The pillow is doing its best, but it's not a cloud. You try to think about how this will affect your dreams tonight, because comfort, or the lack of it, always did. Sleep isn't just rest. It's a journey, a doorway, a state of mind. And your pillow, no matter how strange, is the first step. You stir in the dim light, mid-sleep, or is it waking? The urge hits you suddenly and urgently. You have to go. There's no bathroom down the hall. No porcelain throne with warm water and a flush. Nope. Welcome to the medieval nighttime emergency. You reach for the chamber pot, your closest and most loyal companion in the dark hours. Usually a heavy ceramic or metal pot, sometimes just a bowl, it sits by your bed for this exact purpose. No, it's not glamorous. You carefully lift the pot, trying not to spill, navigate around the sleeping bodies nearby, and aim with precision worthy of an archer. If you miss, well, let's not think about that. Then comes the tricky part. What do you do with the contents? Some households had designated servants or children who took care of emptying the pots, often outside, into the street or a midden pile. In cities, this practice contributed to the famous, and infamous, medieval smell. If you were lucky, your pot got emptied regularly. If not, well, you were sleeping in a soup of your own making. Public health. Decidedly not a priority. Scholars still argue how much the sanitation practices of medieval cities actually contributed to disease spread. Some say the rivers and winds helped disperse the filth. Others argue that poor hygiene fueled epidemics like the Black Death. Speaking of the Black Death, that nasty plague that decimated Europe, you don't want to be around when the pot gets emptied. Back in your room, you try to get comfortable again, but the knowledge of what's outside your door nags at you. Another odd detail. Some wealthier homes had night stairs, separate entrances so servants could carry pots out discreetly without waking the masters. You don't have that luxury. Now, think about this. No running water means no flushing. No toilets. Just pots and open drains. And what about washing your hands after? That's a joke. Soap existed but was scarce and expensive, mostly used for laundry or wool processing. Washing hands or faces was usually done with a basin of water, sometimes scented with herbs, but rarely more than a splash. And speaking of splashes, if you accidentally spilled, tough luck. People walked through the streets barefoot or in simple shoes, stepping over messes. You close your eyes for a moment, inhaling the faint but unmistakable scent of, well, everything. Earthy, fermented, and alive. You wonder how anyone could sleep here. But you do. Because you have no choice. The chamber pot is a nightly reminder that medieval life was raw and unfiltered, sometimes gross, sometimes dangerous, but always real. And if you think that's bad, get this. In some cases, chamber pots were shared between multiple people or even families, passed around like a communal cup. Imagine the conversations. You laugh quietly to yourself. Sleep in this world wasn't just about rest, it was about survival. And the chamber pot was a vital piece of the puzzle. You settle back onto the straw mattress, thankful for the blanket's rough warmth. The moonlight is fading, and dawn is creeping closer. Your thoughts turn to the strange intimacy of the night, the closeness, the shared spaces, the quiet rituals. It's a far cry from the private bathrooms and king-sized beds of today. But it's home. You wrap yourself tighter in the rough linens and prepare for another round of sleep. You wonder, as your eyes flutter closed, how many nights like this your ancestors endured, and what? You wake up in the pale light, not from the sun but from the faint hum of activity outside your door. Time to face the daily ritual that probably feels familiar, but back then, it was a totally different game, brushing your teeth. Or should I say, attempting to brush your teeth. Forget electric toothbrushes, floss, or fancy mouthwash. The medieval dental hygiene toolkit was a grab bag of surprises, and not always in a good way. Your hands reach for a twig. Yes, a twig. Specifically, a chew stick, harvested from trees believed to have cleansing or healing properties. You gnaw on one end until it's frayed, then use it to scrub your teeth. It's the medieval version of a toothbrush, scratchy, fibrous, and oddly satisfying. You rub the twig over your teeth, scraping away the day's grime and last night's dreams. You feel gritty and clean, or at least as clean as you can without modern toothpaste. Speaking of toothpaste, medieval concoctions were interesting. Some recipes included crushed bones, burnt eggshells, ashes, or even powdered charcoal. Sometimes, spices like cloves or mint were added for fresh breath, but flavor was usually secondary too. Function. You spit on the floor, no sinks here, and wipe your mouth with a rough cloth. Here's a weird twist. Some believed that urine was a good teeth whitener and cleanser. Yes, urine. It contains ammonia, which is a natural bleaching agent. Gross. Sure, but practical in a time when chemical knowledge was limited. Scholars still argue how effective and widespread these practices really were, with some suggesting that regular cleaning was rare and tooth decay rampant. No surprise there. If you're wealthy, your dental care might include professional toothpicks made from metal or bone, and regular visits to a barber surgeon for tooth extractions. Yes, tooth extractions. Painful, primitive, and sometimes deadly, since anesthesia and sterile tools were non-existent. The general population had to live with what they got, or lose teeth early and painfully. Dental hygiene was more about preventing terrible breath and obvious rot than actual health. Cavities were often sealed with resin, wax, or even lead pellets if you could afford it. You cringe at the thought. The real kicker: most people didn't even brush daily. Cleaning teeth was often a luxury or a ritual done mostly before church or social events. Imagine that. Your mouth is gritty but somehow satisfying after your twig scrub. Now, think about this. The toothbrush was invented centuries ago, but it wasn't until the 18th century that it took a form similar to what we know today. The chew stick persisted long after. In some cultures, chew sticks are still used today, proving that the old ways sometimes stick around for good reason. You pop a sprig of mint leaf into your mouth, trying to freshen the breath. The medieval morning continues. You wash your face with cold water from a basin, maybe rubbed with a bit of soap made from animal fat and ash. The sensation is rough but refreshing. And now you're ready to face the day, with teeth that may be less than perfect, but at least you've tried. You step outside and take a deep breath. The air is crisp but carries a subtle earthiness, a mix of smoke from hearth fires, animals stirring, and the occasional waft of less pleasant odors from the market or latrines. Welcome to Ancient Hygiene Hacks, the medieval way. You might think medieval people were just living in filth, but they actually had some clever tricks to stay as clean as possible given the times. After all, cleanliness was often linked to spirituality and health, even if their understanding of germs was non-existent. First, let's talk about bathing. Forget luxurious tubs filled with scented oils or bubbles. Baths were rare and usually communal. In cities, public bathhouses were common, where people would soak in large pools heated by wood fires underneath. Sometimes, the water was a bit, well, questionable in quality. In rural areas, folks washed less often. A quick rinse with cold water, a scrub with a rough cloth, or a splash from a nearby stream was more typical. But here's the kicker. Medieval people believed that too much bathing could be harmful. They thought that hot water opened the pores and made you vulnerable to disease and evil spirits. So, ironically, staying too clean was risky. Instead, dry washing was common. Rubbing down with a dry cloth, or even using powders made from herbs, flowers, or chalk to absorb oils and odors. You brush dust off your sleeves and pick a handful of fresh herbs, lavender, rosemary, and mint, from a nearby basket. These were considered natural deodorizers, and sometimes people stuffed them into pillows or hung bunches around the house to ward off bad smells and sickness. Another odd detail. Some used vinegar as a cleaning agent. You dab vinegar on cuts, wounds, or even your hands to disinfect, long before science confirmed its effectiveness. And when it came to laundry, washing clothes was a huge chore. People usually wore the same garment for days or even weeks, layering tunics and cloaks to stay fresh. You imagine the smell. To freshen clothes, people often used straw-filled shoes or packed herbs inside fabric layers. Strange but effective. You're about to pick up a linen cloth to wipe your face when you remember the ultimate medieval hygiene tool, the toilet branch. No, not a toilet brush. It's a thin stick with a clump of moss or wool at one end, used for wiping after you do your business, because toilet paper was centuries away. You shudder but also admire the resourcefulness. Finally, you glance down at your hands, rough and cracked from work. You wash them quickly in a basin with cool water and a tiny bit of soap. Not enough to create suds, but enough to remove dirt. The ritual feels refreshing. In fact, medieval hygiene was a patchwork of folk remedies, superstition, and practical solutions, some surprisingly effective, others, less so. It's not so different from today, really. Except for the lack of showers, and indoor plumbing, and clean running water. But hey, small sacrifices. You inhale the herbs again and smile. You're as clean as you can be today. And that's good enough. You return indoors, the cool morning air following you as you settle by the hearth. The flickering fire casts warm, dancing shadows on the walls, reminding you that despite all these ancient routines, comfort was still a sought-after luxury. Today, your mind drifts to one of the most overlooked yet fascinating medieval wellness secrets: herbal remedies for sleep and relaxation. You pick up a small bundle of dried herbs, lavender, chamomile, and valerian root, each known for their calming properties. These plants were the medieval equivalent of modern sleep aids, often brewed into teas or placed under pillows to encourage restful nights. You steep the herbs carefully in a small clay pot, watching the steam rise and fill the room with a soothing aroma. The scent itself is almost hypnotic, coaxing your muscles to loosen and your mind to slow. It's interesting to note that while people didn't fully understand the chemistry behind these plants, they observed their effects closely, passing down remedies through generations. Scholars still argue whether these herbs truly impacted sleep quality or if their benefits were largely placebo, bolstered by belief and ritual. You take a slow sip of the herbal tea, feeling its warmth spread through your chest. The bitterness is balanced by the natural sweetness of chamomile and the slight earthiness of valerian. Now, the funny thing about medieval medicine is that it wasn't just about what you put into your body, it was also about when and how you did things. Timing your bedtime around certain phases of the moon or avoiding specific foods before sleep was common advice. You think back to the middle of the night wake up we talked about earlier. Some believed that waking at this time was a chance for spiritual communication, a sacred hour to pray or meditate. You imagine lying in bed with a handful of lavender tucked beneath your pillow, waiting for that moment. Another quirky fact: some believed that hanging garlic or mandrake roots near the bed could protect you from nightmares or evil spirits. Mandrake, in particular, was surrounded by superstition. It was said to scream when uprooted, a sound so terrifying it could kill. You chuckle at the thought of mandrake shrieking in the garden. Herbs weren't only for sleep, they were part of daily life. People used them to treat everything from headaches to digestive problems, often blending magic and medicine. You admire the blurred line between science and superstition. Sometimes belief itself was the cure. You sip your tea, slowly, feeling the weight of centuries of tradition in every drop. The fire crackles beside you, a steady companion. You close your eyes briefly, the scent of herbs wrapping around you like a soft blanket. Sleep, after all, is not just about rest, it's about ritual, comfort, and a little bit of magic. You stretch and listen to the faint sounds drifting in from the bustling streets outside, the clatter of wooden carts, the chatter of merchants, and the occasional crow of a rooster. But your mind drifts to something surprisingly modern: the medieval concept of napping and segmented sleep. Contrary to our current 8 hours straight ideal, sleep in the past was often biphasic or segmented. You'd drift off for a few hours after sunset, your first sleep, then wake for an hour or two in the dead of night before slipping back into second sleep. During this wakeful interlude, people didn't just toss and turn. Instead, they read, prayed, reflected, or even visited neighbors. It was a social and spiritual window, a quiet time for personal rituals or household tasks. You imagine lying awake, listening to the crackling fire and distant footsteps, savoring the calm instead of battling insomnia. This pattern, called segmented sleep, was widespread until the Industrial Revolution changed our schedules drastically. Scholars still debate whether segmented sleep was healthier or simply a necessity born of artificial light scarcity and daily routines. Think about it. No electric lights, no screens, just natural rhythms dictated by the sun and moon. You shift in your straw mattress and realize how alien our modern 8-hour sleep marathon must feel to medieval folks. Another quirky detail: during this awake period, people might smoke herbs or incense to calm the mind, or even engage in romantic encounters. Yes, nighttime rendezvous were quite common in the quiet hours between sleeps. You smile at the thought of medieval nightlife, not in taverns, but in bedrooms. The segmented sleep also influenced how people viewed dreams. The first sleep brought more mundane dreams. The second sleep was said to carry prophetic or spiritual visions. You remember the garlic and mandrake stories from earlier, now fitting into this mystical nightscape. It's almost poetic. You feel yourself lulled by the thought of these slow, deliberate nights. There's something gentle about waking calmly, spending time in quiet reflection, and then easing back into rest. The modern push for relentless productivity has buried these slower rhythms deep beneath the surface. You reach out to adjust your rough blanket, feeling grateful for this moment of peace, between wakefulness and sleep, between old and new. And as your eyelids grow heavy again, you realize that maybe there's wisdom in the way your ancestors moved through the night. Sleep isn't just a block of hours, it's a fluid, living thing, woven with rituals, beliefs, and the natural ebb and flow of life. You sink back into the straw mattress, ready for your second sleep. Your body sinks deeper into the bed, and your thoughts drift toward the medieval diet and its surprising impact on sleep quality. You might not immediately connect what you eat with how well you sleep, but back then, food and sleep were tightly linked. You imagine sitting down to your evening meal. Coarse bread, perhaps some salted meat or hard cheese, and a bowl of pottage, a thick stew made from vegetables, grains, and whatever meat was available. Simple, hearty, and filling. Rich folks might have had wine or ale to wash it down. The poor, well, maybe just watered down ale or spring water. Now, here's the kicker. Alcohol was commonly used as a sleep aid, though it often did more harm than good. It could knock you out initially but disrupted the deeper stages of sleep, leaving you groggy and unrested. Interestingly, some medieval physicians recommended warm milk with honey before bed to encourage sleep. You sip your imaginary cup, enjoying the creamy sweetness. Herbs like valerian and chamomile, which you've already met, were also used to soothe nerves and promote rest. Scholars still debate how much the typical medieval diet contributed to common sleep issues like insomnia or restless nights. Because, let's be honest, medieval food was often heavy, salty, and eaten late in the day, hardly the recipe for smooth digestion. You wince as you think about the digestive discomfort that probably kept many tossing through the night. On the other hand, the lack of processed sugars and refined carbs might have balanced things out somewhat. Another strange detail. Some believed that eating certain foods before bed, like beans or cabbage, could cause nightmares or unpleasant dreams. You raise an eyebrow. Sounds like an ancient version of food superstitions we still hear today. You lean back, imagining how your body reacts to this medieval feast. Despite the rough textures and rustic flavors, this diet provided the energy needed to labor hard and survive. And when night falls, it sets the stage for sleep, a complicated dance between nourishment, discomfort, and the rituals that follow. You close your eyes for a moment and picture the communal dining halls, filled with laughter, clinking mugs, and the scent of roasting meat, a reminder that food and rest were inseparable parts of life. You wake up in the chill of dawn, wrapped in the coarse blankets of your bed. As you stretch, your mind drifts to a vital yet overlooked aspect of medieval life, the role of sleep environments and bedding. Forget memory foam or silk sheets. Your mattress is probably a sack stuffed with straw, hay, or even feathers if you're lucky. It's uneven, itchy, and probably smells faintly of last night's fire smoke and whatever critters have made themselves at home. You roll over, trying not to disturb the bugs and fleas that often shared these beds with you. Yes, fleas. Those tiny pests were practically a permanent medieval roommate, making sleep restless at best. The wealthy might have had canopied beds with heavy curtains to block drafts and prying eyes. But for most, beds were sparse and shared, sometimes with multiple family members or even animals. Speaking of animals, it was common for dogs or cats to sleep nearby or even on the bed, keeping pests away and providing warmth. You feel the rough texture of your linen or wool blanket against your skin. Cleanliness wasn't a given. Sheets might be washed only a few times a year, if at all. Scholars still argue how much bedding conditions affected health and sleep quality, especially considering the spread of lice and fleas. The bed frame itself was often simple, wooden planks or rope supports. Feather mattresses were a luxury for nobility. Another quirky detail. Some believed that placing a silver coin under your pillow could ward off nightmares or evil spirits. Whether that helped or not, it's a comforting ritual. You imagine the faint scent of herbs stuffed into the mattress or pillowcases, an old trick to keep the bed smelling fresh and repel insects. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and notice the cold stone floor beneath your feet, a harsh reminder that medieval houses weren't built for cozy comfort. Rugs or rushes were sometimes strewn on floors to add warmth and absorb smells, but they didn't do much for insulation. The medieval bedroom was less a sanctuary and more a practical space, rough, shared, and functional. Yet, within this ruggedness, people carved out moments of rest and respite. You take a deep breath, the smell of wood smoke and herbs filling your lungs, and prepare to face the day. Your sleep environment wasn't perfect, but it was home. And that made all the difference. You sit by the window, watching the morning light filter through the small, uneven glass panes. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and damp earth. Your thoughts turn to the fascinating and sometimes downright bizarre medieval beliefs about dreams and sleep. Back then, dreams weren't just random mental chatter, they were often seen as messages from the divine, omens, or even visits from spirits. You might have kept a dream journal, if you were lucky enough to read and write, or consulted a local wise woman or monk to interpret what your nighttime visions meant. Dreams were sometimes thought to predict the future or warn of danger. People slept with charms or amulets tucked beneath their pillows for protection. You recall the garlic and mandrake roots hanging near beds to ward off nightmares. These weren't just superstition, they were part of a whole medieval dreamscape, where sleep was both mysterious and sacred. Scholars still debate the extent to which these beliefs influenced daily life and how seriously people took dream interpretations. One curious fact: medieval doctors sometimes prescribed sleeping potions, made from plants like henbane or nightshade to induce dreams, or keep them away. Of course, these plants are poisonous in the wrong doses, so using them was a risky business. You shiver at the thought of a bad dream caused by a sleeping potion gone wrong. Another odd detail: some people believed that sleeping in a certain position could affect your dreams or health. Sleeping with your head facing east, for example, was considered auspicious. You adjust your imaginary pillow accordingly. Dreams also played a role in art and literature, inspiring stories that have lasted centuries. From Chaucer's Canterbury Tales to countless religious visions, sleep and dreams shaped the medieval imagination. You wonder about the quiet nights spent pondering dreams, the whispered stories shared by candlelight. Sleep wasn't just rest, it was a doorway to another world, one full of mystery, hope, and sometimes fear. You lean back, feeling the magic of these ancient beliefs wrap around you like a soft cloak. And as your eyelids begin to close, you remind yourself, in every era, sleep holds secrets beyond our understanding. The sun dips low, painting the sky with warm hues as you prepare for the evening. Your mind lingers on one last intriguing piece of the medieval puzzle: how lighting affected sleep routines. There were no LEDs, no bedside lamps, and certainly no screens pulling you into the blue light abyss. Instead, people relied on candles and oil lamps, flickering flames that cast dancing shadows and created a cozy but dim glow. These light sources were precious commodities. Candles made from beeswax were expensive and usually reserved for churches or the wealthy. Most people used tallow candles, made from animal fat, which burned unevenly and smelled awful. The limited lighting meant that once the sun set, activity slowed considerably. You're probably winding down earlier than you do now, guided by natural rhythms rather than endless artificial stimulation. Scholars still argue how much this natural darkness impacted sleep patterns, but it's clear that the absence of bright light helped regulate the body's internal clock. The flickering candlelight also fostered a different kind of atmosphere, one of intimacy, quiet conversation, and reflection. You imagine sitting by a small lamp, reading a letter, or listening to stories told by family members. This limited light shaped not only sleep but social life and mental well-being. Another quirky fact: some believed that placing a candle on the windowsill protected the household from evil spirits roaming the night. Superstitions mixed seamlessly with daily routines, providing comfort and a sense of control. You blow out your imaginary candle, the room slipping into a soft darkness that's both calming and a little mysterious. No glowing screens here, just you, your thoughts, and the slow descent into sleep. It's a simpler way, but maybe a healthier one. You nestle into your bed, the absence of harsh light lulling you gently. As your eyes close, you realize that modern life might benefit from borrowing a little medieval darkness. You lie quietly in your bed, the shadows deepening as the night stretches on. Your thoughts turn to a topic that's rarely discussed but deeply tied to how people slept in the past: the impact of noise and nighttime sounds. Unlike today's constant hum of traffic, electronics, and urban life, medieval nights were filled with a very different soundscape. You hear the distant barking of dogs, the occasional hoot of an owl, and maybe the rhythmic creaking of a cart rolling along cobblestone streets. Some sounds were comforting, like the crackling of the hearth fire or the soft murmurs of family members settling down. Others were a bit unsettling: rats scurrying in the walls, the clatter of horseshoes, or the eerie howl of wolves at the forest's edge. Many medieval folks believed that certain sounds at night carried spiritual significance. The hoot of an owl might foretell bad luck, while a crowing rooster could ward off evil spirits. Scholars still debate how seriously these beliefs influenced people's perceptions and their sleep quality. You imagine trying to fall asleep while being hyper-aware of every creak and rustle. Another quirky fact: some households kept bells or small drums near the bed to scare away bad spirits or announce the arrival of visitors in the dead of night. You smile at the thought of an impromptu percussion concert at 2 a.m. In quiet villages, the lack of human-made noise probably made natural sounds more vivid, sometimes soothing, sometimes unsettling. Contrast that with modern life, where many of us rely on white noise machines or headphones to drown out urban chaos. You realize that the medieval night was alive in a way we rarely experience now. The sounds around you are part of the rhythm of life, a reminder that you're connected to the world even in sleep. You close your eyes, letting the chorus of nocturnal creatures lull you deeper into rest. Noise isn't just disturbance, it's part of the symphony of night. And in that, there's unexpected comfort. The first light of dawn starts creeping through your window as you awake once more. Your mind drifts to an unexpected part of medieval life: how the seasons and weather influenced sleep patterns. Without central heating or climate control, your sleep was at the mercy of nature. In winter, long, cold nights meant extended hours in bed, often huddled under heavy blankets and close to family members or animals for warmth. Summer, on the other hand, brought shorter nights and sometimes uncomfortably warm conditions. Sleeping in the heat of the day was a luxury few could afford, but nighttime brought relief. People adapted in fascinating ways. Windows and doors were left open in warm months, and beds might be moved to cooler spots. Scholars still argue about how much seasonal changes dictated daily schedules and sleep length in medieval times. Interestingly, the medieval calendar was packed with festivals and feast days aligned with seasonal shifts, many of which affected sleep and work routines. During harvest season, for example, sleep was sacrificed for long days in the fields, only to be reclaimed in the off-season. You think about how much modern life has distanced us from natural rhythms. Air conditioning, electric lights, and climate-controlled homes mean we can ignore the seasons, but that disconnect sometimes disrupts our sleep. Another quirky detail: some believed that sleeping with your head pointed north during certain seasons could bring health benefits or bad dreams. You shake your head at these old beliefs but can't help but admire their attempt to find harmony with nature. You stretch and breathe in the fresh morning air, feeling connected to the changing world outside. Your ancestors' sleep was a dance with the seasons, sometimes harsh, sometimes gentle, but always natural. You close your eyes briefly and feel a wave of gratitude for this slow, ancient rhythm. It's a reminder that good sleep isn't just about what you do in bed, it's about the world you live in. And sometimes, the best way to sleep is simply to listen to the seasons. You lie in bed one last time, the day's light fading slowly into night. Your thoughts turn to the final piece of the medieval sleep puzzle: nighttime rituals and preparations. Before sleep, many medieval folks engaged in small, calming routines, prayers, lighting a candle, or arranging their bedclothes just so. Some took a moment to wash their hands and face with cool water, a practice that helped signal the body it was time to rest. The bedtime environment was prepared with care, fresh herbs stuffed into pillows, a candle placed nearby, and sometimes a small charm for protection. Scholars still debate how much these rituals were rooted in religion, superstition, or simply habit. Another quirky fact. Some believed that reciting certain prayers or psalms could protect you from nightmares or evil spirits. You imagine the quiet murmur of voices in dim candlelight, the steady rhythm of words lulling you to sleep. In wealthier homes, the chamber might be adorned with tapestries and heavy curtains to block drafts and noise, creating a cozy sanctuary. For the average person, the bed was simple but the ritual was sacred. You recall the many elements you've encountered in this journey: the segmented sleep, the herbs, the smells, the sounds, and the rhythms of nature, all woven together. These rituals helped ease the mind and body into rest. As you prepare to close your eyes, you feel a connection across time, a shared human experience of seeking comfort and peace at the end of the day. You nestle under your blankets, the scents of lavender and rosemary faint but reassuring. The flicker of candlelight dims as you drift off. Sleep, after all, is a timeless journey. A moment to rest, recharge, and dream. And now, it's your turn. Awaiting instructions for wind down. Soft wind down. The world outside quiets as night deepens, wrapping you in a gentle, velvety calm. You feel the slow, steady rhythm of your breath, like waves gently lapping a peaceful shore. The faint scent of herbs lingers softly in the air, mingling with the cool whisper of the night breeze through an open window. Every muscle in your body begins to relax, melting into the comfort of your bed. The rough textures and flickering candlelight fade away, replaced by a soft, comforting darkness that invites you to sink deeper into rest. Your thoughts drift like soft clouds, light and free. Imagine the slow turning of the seasons outside, the moon's gentle glow watching over you, the timeless dance of night and day carrying you safely through the hours of sleep. You are connected to all who have rested before you, in ancient homes, simple beds, beneath the same stars. Let your mind float, carried on the whispers of history, on the delicate threads of ritual and comfort. Sleep is your sanctuary, a sacred pause, a place to dream and heal. As you breathe out slowly, feel the weight of the day dissolve, replaced by calm and softness. Good night, and sweet dreams. Please like, share this video with your friends and subscribe our YouTube channel, The Best Way of Sleeping, for more updates.